Deathrolling is a pastime game that sees two players use the slash roll command from a starting point all the way down to 1. You can start at 1000 and whatever number you roll, the opponent has to roll from that number. Whoever hits 1 first is the loser. But what if we took this concept and made it a leveling challenge? That's what I intend to do today. The rules aren't too crazy. Each level I'll be rolling from my previous number, and if the roll ever hits 1, I lose my highest item level piece of equipment as well as being unable to use that slot. I'll also be forcing my next max number to drop by 100. The current numbers will also determine what expansion I'm going to play to make it a little more interesting. On screen is the numbers that we'll be going by. I'm excluding levels 1 through 10 and then levels 70 through 80 because Chromie isn't available in those brackets. Getting the max roll will allow my number to double the next turn. Any deaths will be an automatic loss of 1 piece of equipment. Losing all equipment and dying is considered a failure in this challenge. And then of course the legacy rules, such as no instance content unless forced. Specialization will be unlocked once you hit level 10, and that is the one that you will stay with. We will have war mode turned on by level 20, and this time there will be no bind on account gear, and I can't sandbag higher item level equipment in my bags. Finally, no auction house, external potions, buffs, or otherwise. Our first death roll number will begin at 1500, and the goal is to get to level 80 to complete all the Khazalgar leveling campaign. Now, with all the boring stuff out of the way, it's time to introduce you to the strong cow of this episode, Beef Stew. Born in Mulgore, Beef Stew had a dream, wanting to see the world and cook the best dishes known to WoW-kind. So he pulled out his knife and practiced cutting vegetables disguised as Quillbore. Already he felt he was honing his skills, wanting to take charge of a kitchen and make a meal for the world. He quickly freed the local population to get them to try his dish. Unfortunately, most of them seemed disinterested in trying to consume raw Quillbore meat, and the aspiring cook would need to find better ingredients if he hoped to win the hearts and stomachs of his people. And so, with a mallet in hand, he began beating up the poachers for ingredients. But as he slew the last of the poachers, it dawned on him. Instead of fighting the poachers, why not feed them? So he went to their farming grounds and massacred an entire stead of boars to make into one juicy dish. Satisfied with his work, the apprentice threw all of his meat into one of the troughs and stirred it like a stew before pulling out his breastplate and laying the steaming slop in it. He took it to the poacher leader, Squealer Meatmantle, who was absolutely mortified that this cowman came charging at him with an amalgamation of carcasses. The result was him heaving after Beef Stew tried to get him to eat. And eat he did to his very last breath. Happy with him, the Tauren of Mulgore celebrated the death of the poacher leader, but Beef Stew thought it was because they really enjoyed his new creation. But he needed a teacher, someone who could show him the art of cooking really good dishes. He found it out in the open plain, meeting Morin Cloudstalker, who told him that the ingredients he sought were at a burnt down camp. The task became apparent. Get the cooking supplies, and he'd teach the young Tauren how to make a proper dish. This excited Mr. Beef, and Morin Cloudstalker said that the first thing to learn is that bad cooking should not be tolerated. As such, he'd need to teach Fizz Sprocket, who'd been accused of sprocketing fizz all over people's food, a lesson. The cowman understood and challenged him to a cook-off. Sadly, the dish was so terrible that the supervisor was found dead in the mines for unknown reasons. Concerned, Morin told Mr. Beef to go find ingredients, but the young cow felt that he had learned enough and decided to share his new dish, the Hammer Slammer, to the Gnoll population. Unfortunately, the Gnolls were more interested in running away than trying his new dish, so he went back to the village and asked the people why his food was not being served. They seemed downright terrified of Mr. Beef and did not give him an answer. When he asked his last friend, it dawned on him. Every big chef had a theme of food. What was his theme? He'd have to learn a specialization and set his mind to it if he hoped to have a dream of one day being the chef of people. This is where roles will start to matter for expansion swaps, so keep that in mind moving forward. Currently our roll is 15, so we'll be sticking to Mulgore for now. After obtaining one more cooking ingredient and having his people store them for the road, he was ready to go find what his true dish should be. Off he went, to the ease of his people, seeking new knowledge in a different part of Mulgore. Maybe the dead had answers, so he taught to one of his ancestors, only for them to tell him dead people don't have taste buds. This answer confused Mr. Beef, who promptly gathered more feathers to see if their softness would help pillow his new creation. Now, to be fair, someone at a nearby camp did give him advice. Things like seasoning, vegetables, and proper portions are just a few things that would make a dish more powerful. But Mr. Beef became confused. Lettuce, more like let this digging to hone his skills. Mr. Beef heard one of the most powerful chefs in the land, Orno Grimtotem, was not far from here and promptly challenged him to a cook-off. For some reason though, Orno attacked a cow on sight and then promptly found himself in audience with the highest power of Thunderbluff, Bane Bloodhoof. In awe, Beef Stew asks what high quality dish Chef Grim told him have in store for Bane, only for Bane to look at him dumbfounded and say that Orno was a powerful chief, not chef. To which Mr. Beef asked Bane if Orno's mother once served Karen a delicious dish. Bane, being absolutely annoyed by this, let it slide because this was the dude that softened up a big threat in the area, so he tells the aspiring cook to go find his way for new entrees amongst the orcs. And so off to Orgrimmar he went, speaking to High Overlord Sarfang, who told him that the goblins of Azshara had strong cooking methods. Eitrigg is concerned that this cowman is talking to absolutely nothing, but chooses not to intervene, considering that Mr. Beef was already on his way to Azshara. Upon arriving, Mr. Beef soon realizes that the goblins have an entire kitchen stored inside of a mobile machine, and is ecstatic to get even bigger ingredients. Of course, taking the advice of his teachers in Mulgore, he decides to give this lettuce a try, and promptly works to cook this nearby tree into something more edible, not realizing that you don't just set fire to lettuce because it burns instantly. The goblins then take away his mobile kitchen because the APR financing can't recover from such high amounts of use, and then Mr. Beef contemplates using a goblin for his next dish, bringing it up to the closest tower he can find. The goblins, absolutely terrified that this cowman might consider cannibalism, make him a deal that they'll get him a new kitchen supply if he promises not to cook them. Of course, Mr. Beef accepts this deal and goes to hone his skills on creating the best fillet of fish the goblins have ever seen. He finds a big cooking ray and decides to see if he can fire a fish directly into the mouth of one of those giants. Unfortunately, the big rocket is of course lethal, it's a big fucking rocket, so at this point, being absolutely frozen in fear, the goblins decide to hatch a plan in which they tell the Tora that they've built a new mobile kitchen for him to try. Excited, Mr. Beef gives this a go, only to realize it springs to life without him inside of it. This was the plan, to attack him with a faulty siege engine and hope for the best. Of course, when you watch a mountain of a man beat the demons out of your tank, then you will likely be thinking you're next on the menu as he comes back to you and asks for another kitchen. They quickly become uncertain of what to do here and tell him that the kitchen is in Orgrimmar, so he goes off in that direction for just a moment before coming back a second time. As the goblins start to run out of ideas of what to do here, a voice calls for Mr. Beef to stop his time in Azshara. It seems that if he wants to learn about true cooking, that he should speak with Chromie and Orgrimmar. Mr. Beef has no idea how a new voice entered his head, but this compels him to show off his cooking skills to the best. The gloves are now off. You'll notice that this is our first roll down to 1, and as a result, we're removing the first piece of equipment here. The new roll will be set to at 1400, and per our rules, we'll be going to Dragonflight now. I'll try not to make a big note like this in the future, but expect this to be how this works for the duration of this challenge. After speaking to a gnome on what he assumes is a rice cooker, because what else would you put a gnome on, he's transported to a new strange land with lots of big, hungry dragons. This, of course, is a new revelation of people he could potentially feed, so he probably gets to work on creating a new dragon-style burger. This prompts him to discover a new style of cooking, with fire, of course. And like any ambitious young go-getter, Mr. Beef goes on the biggest fire he can find so he can mush his dragon amalgamation together under the hot heat. He comes over to offer the burger to a nearby Draenei. She asks what it's made out of, and he happily tells her that it might be the very people in this embassy. Absolutely traumatized, a nearby Drakthir opens a portal and pushes the cowman back to Chromie. Perhaps a different planet might be best for Mr. Beef, seeing as how he isn't working so well in the civilized parts of society, so Chromie promptly sends him to Draenor. Khadgar has seen stranger things and asks Mr. Beef to save the universe, to which Cowman responds he will feed the universe. Of course, this does not stop Mr. Beef from releasing a fellow chef from his binds instead of killing him, because the entirety of Warlords of Draenor could have been avoided if you killed Gul'dan, you stupid fuck. But it's okay. They wander deeper into the vegetation, and Thrall promises the Cowman that if they make it out of here alive, he will teach him the fullest extent of orcish cooking. Excited by the prospect, Mr. Beef saves 2 people from fire, not because he wasn't interested in cooking them, but because he wanted it done on his own terms. However, as he sees a future with orcish cooking, the cave side collapses, leaving him stranded. It took him a whole 15 minutes to try to find a solution before this strange thing in his bag crushes instantly and sends him out of the cave. Saddened by the revelation of losing his teacher, he immediately returns to Chromie, who is absolutely confused about how Cowman got back into this timeline. Mr. Beef has had enough of this wandering and wants to go back to Azshara, so she sends him through a portal back to the Goblin Land, which causes them borderline hysteria. Uncertain if death is inevitable, the goblins quickly try to send Cowman to the gnomes, promising that he'd find some valuable cooking equipment there. They just happen to be right as Mr. Beef finds a rival cook, challenging him to a cook-off. The gnome is outright confused as to why a horde member is this far into his base, and after a brief struggle, the gnome is made into a pancake, and his cooking recipes are brought back to the goblins. What he actually ended up getting the goblins was a transporter recipe that explained how the gnomes even got here, so they took a copy and sate Cowman's need for knowledge at the moment. Of course, Mr. Beef goes to follow the recipe. First, it calls for fission, which means in his mind, fish. The recipe doesn't say how much fish is needed because of course it doesn't, so Cowman kills off many fish, and I mean a lot of them. And the goblins are happy to help, considering they're at war with the Naga. Next on the list, the recipe calls for the liquid nitrate. And while nitrate isn't a word, at least clear liquid needs water to Mr. Beef. So he gets a salt rock and starts absorbing every bit of water he can find in hopes that this is the start of a proper soup. One with all meat and no lettuce. After taking no time at all to absorb the unwilling water elemental, he finds a suitable cauldron to set his current ingredients and continues to read from the list of items which requests for granite rocks. Why pebbles have to get involved is beyond Mr. Beef, but the cowman is determined to make this dish at all cost. Unfortunately, he didn't realize the cauldron he left his ingredients was absolutely acidic, and when he came back, his list and his items are completely gone. Without hope and desperate, Cowman discovers that a cooking class is not too far away from where he was getting to work. Of course, the main chef and his cult are happy to accept him as they were about to partake in a final test of culinary arts. Mr. Beef is uncertain about how being thrown off a mountain constantly makes him a better chef, but he's certain it will all be explained once he gets to the top. However, upon getting there, he sees that all the apprentices are turned into evil spirits, and the chef only has one word to say to him: Furbolgs. Of course, the Furbolgs are an ancient cooking people. Their whole thing is being able to turn wood into food. But the problem is that the elves are allied with the Furbolgs, and the elves don't like Mr. Beef because he's been massacring pretty much every living thing in the name of cooking ingredients. He goes to the Furbolgs in this disguise and tells them that they don't have enough toenail clippings and foot rubs to be good cooks. They don't take too kindly to Elf Beef, but he takes pretty much all of the hovel down. Hopefully, when the new generation comes back in a few years, they'll be ready to cook him a proper dish. Along the way, Mr. Beef runs into a dragon, and in an attempt to make a dragon burger, he tries to take the pet away from an orc. Of course, the pet is not happy, and he's about to go gargoyle drop techniques on Mr. Beef, but because of an even bigger dragon, he is saved and praised for his heroic deeds. Mr. Beef has no idea what this guy is talking about, but because the dude is nearly triple the size of his usual burger quota, he decides it's best not to provoke this one and moves on. The goblins, not happy to see Mr. Beef again, quickly offer a solution in which he could go take more ingredients from elves if he so chooses by helping the nearby orcs, so he agrees to take out a couple negative cooks who have been slandering his juicy name. With this first part complete, the orcs compel Mr. Beef to cook with fire once again on the nearby town and take out a commander who has been starving his people. Mr. Beef goes to teach the new commander about the wonders of food, but of course since he's an elf, he goes straight into attack mode. Mr. Beef is getting tired of people just automatically attacking him on sight, so he's sent to Ashenvale to hopefully find a new hope of opening a small kitchen with hammer slammers, dragon burgers, and whatever that thing the gnomes were creating. He starts mending the wounds of the populace, hoping to get the clientele for his food. And of course, he sets up a small plate for them to try it on while he takes care of another problem. The elves are obviously not too happy with him getting recipe items on their own turf, so they promptly ambush him. The voice of Sarfang tells him that the best thing to do for his restaurant is to murder them, so he defeats the captain and goes to check on his clientele. Unfortunately for him, the people who ate his food got so sick that the place had to be put on lockdown, so he goes elsewhere to serve his cuisine. Here at the new post, he meets a man by the name of Durak, who sees the ambitious go-getter for what he is, a bright and potential chef who might just be stupid enough to take a proposition in the ways of the green fire, a style lost to orcs quite a while ago. He makes a mention about the dead and how he should start there, and thinking about what his ancestors said at the beginning, he thinks this isn't such a bad idea. Could Durak be his teacher? Of course, before he can learn, the leader of the camp with all the sick people reprimands Cowman for creating bad dishes and strips him of his shoes for recompense. Now Cowman will create proper toenail stew now is beyond him, but as he's thinking it over, another voice calls for him to go back to the gnome in the city. As direct prophecies come to pass, the gnome speaks of the land of the dead. the Shadowlands. This beautiful place is certain to be what drives him, and he's bored of it already. Too much pristine, not enough personality. Somehow he gets back to Orgrimmar, and the gnome, shot to her core and trying to figure out how this cow transcends reality, settles to sending him back to a different land of the dead in Northrend. The undead, rather than seeing his awful cooking as a sign of fear, instead see it as an opportunity, telling him to gather ingredients for a potent dish they're creating. Excited to learn from master chefs, Cook Stew goes around the local area, sourcing ingredients from a map to containers of strange green goo, which he has been told is seasoning. The plan is to feed the hungry people on boats far, far away. Cook Stew could hear their satisfied screams, mixing his food with such a seasoning. A gracious deed, no doubt. Returning to the undead, one of the generals gives him a pat on the head and tells him he did a great job. Perhaps once this is all over, Cook Stew will give her the steak. For now though, he feels himself committed to Durak's words and goes to study more on the technique of green fire. Chromie, who keeps staring at this transcendent cow, simply can't believe she's actually getting a workout in magic today and sends him to where he needs to go in Outlands. He was told this is where green fire cooking was implemented, but the locals aren't so willing to share their secrets. Frustrated, the cowman decides that if he can't learn from the locals, then the next best thing to do is to bring some samples of his tour and see if Durak would be willing to teach him more. Of course, this means gathering green dust reagents from the demonic population, but eventually he gets enough reagents to bring back to Durak in excited fashion. It should go without saying that Chromie is now at the mercy of whatever Cook Stew wants and will be waiting with anticipation to see how many times a cow can simply break the rules of reality. Upon returning to his post, Cook Stew runs to Chef Durak, begging to be trained by the wise orc in the ways of green fire. Chef Durak agrees, giving him a small taste of the potency of what green fire could do. Needless to say, the green fire cooks leaves, people, and otherwise in an effective manner, and this exciting road seems like it'd be a perfect fit for our new hero. With his eyes awakened, Cook Stew seeks out an element of green fire everywhere under Durak's skies, igniting a green flame to cause an orc to appear, and each powerful reagent he collects for Durak will make his skill that much stronger. While Cook Stew is getting everything, he gets a request from Orgrimmar to come to the war room. This green fire cooking is truly a miracle. Being requested to cook for Overlord Saurfang is truly an honor. However, once he arrives, although Saurfang continues to wave at him, Eitrigg, remembering what happened earlier, quickly gets the cook's attention, explaining to him the evils of green fire and telling him that if he doesn't turn away from this path, he'd never truly be able to stand on his own as a chef. He then points to one of the cook's fingers, noticing it had been removed, and with eyes wide open, the cook realized that this Ermac character might be right. Shocked and in horror, Cook Stew goes to the gnome woman, who at this point is just playing roulette to see how many different time waves she can send him in. Back to the Shadowlands to discover if Durak was truly the teacher he needed. He discovered there that the Deadlands were bland, boring, seasonless. No one was here to serve, just to bark and demand. What a failure. This horrifying realization hit Cook Stew like stone bricks. How could this be? What about his friends in Northrend? Well, upon trying to get back to them, Chromie instead decides to help our young cook open his eyes. This is the land where those individuals hailed from, and seeing that they partied so hard that there was nothing left, Cook Beef watched in awe as he had to embrace the gloom of Durak's twisted words. All the work that he did for the undead had been designed to be for tummy aches, not for making delicious food that everybody loved. Even when he went back to look at evidence of the green fire, all he found there was many signs of cracks, such as a missive to bring anyone and everyone into the green fire team as much as possible. This couldn't be true. Cook Stew sat there, feeling deceived and uncertain of his future in Durak's hands. The deeper he went, the more he found harsher realities, until facing down one of the most difficult locals who had told him actively that Durak had everything he needed and now wanted his sous chef dead. This betrayal, he couldn't accept it. He wanted to return and confront Durak with this. This could not be happening. Chromie granted him his wish once more, allowing him to see Durak for who he truly was. In that place where they first met, Cook Stew asked Durak the truth. Was he a good chef? Did he truly have the delicious intentions of feeding the people? Durak unfortunately realized that this was the end of the road for them, and in a clash of green fire, took to fighting his sous chef in a cucumber cutting competition. Unfortunately, Durak didn't even know how to cut a cucumber and was cut down for his misleading statements. And like that, a teacher once trusted was now gone. How could he move on? Cook Stew needed to know Was cutting fish the only way for him to move forward? Could he dare feed people again, knowing that his only sense of direction he had was a complete lie? He wanted to do more than just serve cooked steaks from wild bucks. And sure, some level of appreciation for his basic culinary arts were present, with people offering him a little to keep track of, but it seemed like for everything that he worked to get better at, there were people who still despised his dishes. For every plate he was offered as a show of finishing their food in a somewhat it was alright kind of way, he'd offer more plates that people despised and would rather set their houses on fire to get away from. Unsure of what to do, Cook Stew turned himself to the Earth's Mother's children to consult their reflection on the matter. And when they sent him on a mission to stop the red flame from destroying a part of a mountain, he understood. It wasn't about being able to make the best dish in town, or being a culinary reinventor. Instead, he had to take the basics back into his cooking: seasoning, proper portions, ingredients that were fresh, never frozen, except in cans maybe, and for that, he thanked them. All three of the elements, even the goblin, looked at him confused because no, it was literally about stopping a red guy on the mountain. He was setting the whole place on fire. Reignited, Cook Stew went back to Splinter Tree, reflecting on the braziers nearby, as well as a table in the center of the inn. He then proceeded to ask the Furbolgs for help, not realizing that most of the generation probably wouldn't be born for a while because he only killed them a few hours ago. As such, the culinary arts of the Furbolgs weren't in his grasp just yet, no matter who he went to get them from. Shep Murgut wasn't willing to give him the secrets as of yet, something about how he was there for pillaging, not food, whatever. It was clear that the heat in Ashenvale still ran hot from Durak, and as such, if he wanted answers, he was going to have to go into the field and learn. He was taught that if you see people in their underwear, that you'd be able to talk to them better, so he stripped out of his pants, hoping people would speak to him with this in mind. And the first person he talked to was Chromie, who at this point is probably thinking a major crime is about to be committed because he isn't wearing any pants, so she sends him underground, hoping that Azeroth herself will set him straight, and he receives a funny looking dinner plate that he puts around his neck. He's then called to go to a city of wondrous troll architecture. Fortunately, the trolls are just savage enough to let him get past the gates. Unfortunately, as quickly as he gets there, the Horde are telling him to go put on some clothes because this isn't the time and place for such antics. So he walks back up to Chromie. Chromie is going, "Please, for the love of Nozdormu, put your junk away," and sends him to the trapped cave. Thankfully, these guys have been just sitting here for days with no way to really leave, so they tolerate Cook Stew's presence for now. What's more, they're starving, and he has just enough venison on him to get them what they need. He helps reinvigorate the trapped cause and gets them all out by breaking down the Breaker, who's been harboring all the delicious cuisine for himself. With freedom at last, Thrall approaches Tataran once again, offering him a promise of a cooked life if he gets them out of this. The cook agrees and pushes forward under the guise of Chef Thrall. Despite this, however, Cook Stew found himself in stasis, until eventually he popped himself back over to Chromie, who explained to him that if he accidentally hurt Thrall in some way, he might completely alter the future timeline, and she couldn't risk that. Cook Stew didn't know what she was going on about in short order, and she had instead sent him off to Mount Highjaw with post haste. He landed here and started massacring pebbles to throw onto a grill, before once again Chromie pulled him back because he had a bad habit of trying to turn dragons into burgers. So she sent him back to Outlands, hoping that this time there wasn't going to be a problem. What she didn't realize, however, is that she had ended up reinvigorating his passion for exploring the world for new cooking ingredients by any means possible. He even found a new chef's knife that was perfect for his size, stature, and ability. Of course, once Cook Stew started getting into a rhythm, Chromie got involved once more, realizing that pretty much any timeline that he was going to end up in would be an awful situation for everyone involved, and that she probably just had to clean up whatever he did later, eventually flocking him back to Splinter Tree. This timeline shenanigan nonsense was actually making him a little paranoid, and so he decided to maybe go somewhere else. Maybe there was a spot that he could call home. And find home he did, cooking for an army as a grunt. And although the grunts didn't particularly care for his food, he did at least give them something to eat, which is a plus when your land is nothing but stumps and barrens. Here he felt innovation, trying new things like tiger steak with an elf sauce, quail, but 2 L's instead of an I. Who wouldn't want to try bird ribs? They're like pork, but flying chickens. This was the moment he felt truly lively, getting rid of Alliance to start his own bar, where tents were nearby, and he could put grunts in those tents, and he could give them something to eat. For all of his work, he was promoted to a sergeant. Sergeant Cook Stew knew he had potential. Mysteriously, however, the people of the mines weren't doing so hot. He went to investigate and discovered that they had food poisoning, and those who didn't were being killed off by the coal cook stew had used to fire up some of his creative entrees. As such, before he could cause a mass extinction of the Orcus population, Chromie quickly intervenes and yanks him out once again. This time she decides that his best point is to be in the present, so that way his actions can at least be monitored by others. But in all of this, Cook Stew realized that he had been able to feed an army. He was a sergeant now, damn it, and his title was going to reflect him as much. Call him Sergeant Chef Beef. Immediately reporting for duty, Chef Beef wasted no time gathering spider legs from some spider leg stew. The general population needed this food desperately, seeing as how the big city had been destroyed and anything was better than nothing. Once secured, Chef Beef took on the head Narubian chef of the area, Xerix. A good cook-off is what he searched for, and a good cook-off is what he got, chopping spider from stew and making it clear that he was the dominant chef in the area now. One thing is certain, however, the Narubians have a good taste for them to have thrived in as many numbers as they have. Even more good news for Chef Beef was his ability to help out Bran Bronzebeard in an underground cave facility. Considering Bran had only been eating Narubian legs since he got here, he figures a little seasoning would never hurt. The two of them take down a big Narubian and they will be feasting good tonight. It was time to take this job seriously. Mushrooms, meat, spider legs, all he needed to make a high quality dish for the newly found Earthern allies. No doubt, once his major dish was complete, everyone would think he was nothing but a success. Of course, there were still people who didn't like his dish. One person beat him down for poisoning his mother with a dragon burger. How can you mess up a burger? No one knows. Robert made off with one of his signature garnish signets. No more void sauce for the dishes. Later on, Pilgrim desires to feed his army before a big fight at the brewery. There's something that Chef Beef was training for all 5 levels ago. So he's honored to do so, only to realize that the place has been infested with evil void people. Truth be told, the Earthern were immune to disease, so it really was a lesser of two evils situation, but the Earthern took their chances on being evil versus being sick. In fact, the wood oven in the background suggested that they were going to try to make their own dishes first, but Goran realized the situation wasn't going to work, so instead he mercy killed some of his men who would have been subjected to Chef Beef's cooking. Unfortunately, things just got out of hand. Controlled chaos no longer seems to be a means to an end, and while Chef Beef lives on, the void people are properly disposed of. Realizing this is probably at least 79% Chef Beef's fault, Pilgrim realizes there's nothing left for the Tauren here and sends him off to go pester another group of people. While the Earthern may not appreciate his cooking, surely he can find people who desire what he serves. He tries to go to the kobolds, who already seem prone to violence against anyone who isn't a kobold, so go figure, this doesn't work either. Perhaps he just got off on the wrong foot with them, however. Kobolds are pretty much only eating gravel, so surely something was better than nothing at this point, right? He goes into the inn, sits Glintwing down, and tries to feed him spider leg stew. With him being so repulsed, Glintwing starts convulsing candle juice everywhere. That wasn't supposed to happen. Chef Beast isn't about to give up though. He has his voice, he has his cuisine, now he just needs the right market. But not before he has to deal with some more kobold shenanigans. At this point they're actively hunting him, sending elementals at him. But considering he's mastered himself against the red and green fire, this elemental is basically nothing. At least one kobold, Skitter, likes his food so much that he crowns him king of the kobolds and allows him to go inside the cleft to retrieve a crown for his success in culinary arts. But even so, this was a disastrous blow for Chef Beef, seeing as how he couldn't get anyone to like his food. The Earthern were actively against him, at least the ones that could be, trying to turn themselves into Scaradon so they may not have to taste the stew. The worst part? This was only by reputation of the past alone. No one had been able to try his dish. Not even the allies were looking to do so after the incident at the Rookery. They were just sending him along the river. He did everything he could, seeking out the wisdom of Granny Cobalt to try to figure out what he was missing. Of course, she told him the true ingredient to all dishes is love and time. So he went to Hollowfall, full of love, only for it to get shot out of him by a level 80 hunter, who then also decided to steal his helmet for good measure. Oh, and the same guy decided to take his time away as well. Belt was gone once he woke up from that. That was a little bit strange. Anyway, one of the things that did not stop the cow was determination. He would seek people who desired the love for his dish, one way or another. Maybe Anduin would have given it a chance if he wasn't so busy being a crybaby and spawning evil-looking amalgamations with his tears. Stop it, Anduin. No one likes that. Strangely enough, it was Aelric of all people who gave Chef Beef an idea. What if the people he was looking for were the people he'd been cutting down this whole time? What if the Narubians were looking for a good chef? What if he needed to go deeper into Ka'ach Kahet? And so he gathers fresh ingredients without the spider legs and calls it the Narubian masterpiece. And although Hallfall certainly didn't want to try his dish, he realizes that there may be yet hope if he can just get one, and I mean one Narubian, to speak to him. And in the darkness he finds a woman by the name of the Weaver, dangling down and desiring to know more of Chef Beef, even calling him her little morsel. He gets the opportunity to get her to try the stew, and to his delight, she says it's delicious. Such words had never been spoken to him. He goes around telling other Narubians and giving them samples, enough to get those final bits of fame he needs amongst those Narubians. And with enough courage in his heart, he summons the 3 major powers of Narubian might, and they all agree for him to be their head chef. And so, after 13 hours of looking, searching, and hoping, Chef Beef has found his place amongst the Narubians, cooking him his mighty, bold stew to this very day.